Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and updates on the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Good to see you, Damon.
You as well. And Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Howdy.
And this week we've got some confirmation of something I bet a lot of us assumed to be true in the first place. So Microsoft has conceded or admitted that Game Pass, Xbox Game Pass, does hurt sales of games. The confirmation was included as part of the UK Competition and Markets Authority's provisional report on Microsoft's proposed $69 billion merger with Activision Blizzard. And Microsoft had submitted an internal analysis to the government body that showed, quote, a redacted % decline in base game sales 12 months following their addition on Game Pass. So this might seem like kind of a no-duh revelation, but Ryan, this does conflict with things that Phil Spencer has said in the past. Is that right?
Yeah, 2018, he was on record saying it boosted sales. And, maybe it did in 2018, when the whole thing was still pretty new. The market's totally different now. Everything is, we're in a new generation. Things are different. But you're right. It's an obvious thing. It's the same. It's like, well, sure, the Blu-ray sales of movies on streaming services are probably down compared to where they were before streaming services existed as well. But I think the key difference for me between the Game Pass as a good thing argument versus a Netflix as a good thing argument, a Netflix show, if there's no Netflix, you can probably still watch that show for free or for whatever money you're already paying for something, for your basic cable package, satellite TV package, whatever. But with games, without Game Pass, I've heard from a million people, like you probably would have never played that game because you would never have paid for it. There was no way to just low risk try it out. So that's really the big value with Game Pass, I think, compared to something like Netflix. And this is, of course, again, we've seen this before with Microsoft's attempted acquisition here. They are trying to look as meek and meager as possible so that the CMA says, okay, you guys aren't that big and bad. We'll go ahead and let this through. Whereas, to the public, they would never present the information this way. They'd be like, they'd just be puffing their chests out and be like, yes, everything we do is amazing and everything we do is successful. So there's always that little part of it makes me chuckle.
Sure. But I guess we should clarify that, this isn't necessarily a bad thing for Microsoft, right? Their whole model is they want people in the ecosystem subscribing, paying their $15 every single month. And that could, it could work out to be as lucrative or even more than just selling individual games, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a long game. Microsoft's playing a long game here. It's, and this is why we don't see, well, one of two reasons why we don't see Xbox games in the top 10 of NPD reports anymore. The other reason, of course, being they have to ship some big games, which they haven't done much of lately. But yeah, they're just, success is a different metric for them, and it is a big bet. But they've got the deep pockets. They've now got the studios, and they're trying to add some more with this Activision Blizzard deal. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's great for gamers. I could see how you might worry a little bit about game preservation, particularly some of these smaller indie games. If they go off the service, you hope they're still going to live somewhere and be somewhere where you can have them and keep them in your library. But yeah, for gamers, it continues to be a great deal, and it's already paid off this year with Hi-Fi Rush.
What would you guess, if you had to guess, that redacted % decline in base game sales 12 months following their addition to Game Pass, what would you guess that percentage would be? Because I would think it'd be upwards of 50%. That's
a great question, and I hadn't even really considered it, but yeah, I'd say 50 at least. Yeah, given, I haven't bought anything that I've played on Game Pass. Have you, Max? I don't know.
No, some stuff I already own, but no.
Yeah, and I know there are some people that do, right? Because there's usually a discount, and you might want to, if it could be going off in the service, and you want to make sure you still have it and keep it. But yeah, it's definitely got to be at least a 50% figure, if not higher.
So Max, Sony has a fairly similar service now in the all-new PlayStation Plus. Can we assume that PlayStation Plus is also bad for sales on the PlayStation platform?
Yeah, and I mean, I think they're trying to prevent sales from being worse by not throwing all their first-party stuff on the service day and date. Like, this is a quandary because obviously we benefit from things being cheaper, like getting access to more games for less money. That's awesome, but games are also super expensive to make, and I worry that maybe pricing Game Pass like Microsoft has and offering such an awesome deal, which again I love. I think it's wonderful, but I wonder if it doesn't devalue, but kind of drives down the going rate for what people are willing to shell out for a game. And I feel like Sony's kind of like digging their heels in a little bit to be like, no, don't. Please try to buy the game, pay the money for it, and that's tricky. Like competition is good, but if it gets too kind of bloodthirsty, it just is like one person's dragging the other one down. Yeah, I mean, this obviously is less of an issue for Sony because I shelled out $70 for The Last of Us Part 1. Because I mean, if that had been on PS Plus, I would have jumped on that, no question. They probably took a pretty huge hit with the PlayStation Plus collection, which that was that bundle of 19 great PS4 games that was available to anybody who bought a PS5 for basically the first 2 years and change, and was a PS Plus subscriber. And you kind of do the math on that. And it's like, I don't think that deal necessarily sold people on PS5s, but it definitely pushed people who just bought a PS5 into shelling out a few bucks for a PlayStation Plus subscription, because it's a pretty lucrative deal. Now, conversely, had those people not been offered that deal, how many of them would have bought those games on their own, just kind of scooped them up? The problem is that it's people like it when you cut prices, but people don't like it when you raise prices. But if the prices are too low to begin with and they're unsustainable, then there's kind of really only one direction you can go, and it's everyone's painted into sort of different corners right now.
Like Arizona iced tea having to come up from 99 cents.
Yeah,
finally.
Not everything can be Costco hot dogs, as much as I really wish it could.
Ryan, as much as we like Game Pass, it does have its detractors, and one of the things that they like to bring up is they say Game Pass, it's not sustainable. The model is not sustainable, even though I believe it's been running for 6 years now. Microsoft seems to be all in on it. Do you have any thoughts on that? Will it be more of a challenge if Xbox does start pumping out these huge first-party titles day one on Game Pass on a more regular basis?
Yeah, number one, who cares as far as from the gamer's perspective if it's sustainable? It's currently an awesome deal, and if one day it goes away, then I guess I'll go back to paying $70 for first-party Xbox games. But in the meantime, it's awesome. It's a $15 a month subscription, and you just get everything. But yeah, I agree. The whole it's not sustainable argument, I think, is really what those people are trying to say is there's a content problem on Game Pass, because I suspect a lot of those people by the end of this year will change their tune on it's not sustainable when Starfield's in there, when Redfall's in there, when Forza Motorsport's in there. Who knows? Atomic Heart next week goes in there. MLB The Show. There's going to be a long list of some big games over the course of this year that go in and finally fix the glaring problem of Game Pass.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, these things they're competing for your time and your money, but the time is a key one because you can really only play one game at a time. I think it's going to be interesting to see how games as a service, kind of affect this going through, because so many of those have, season passes or battle passes or, stuff like that, where again, it's another little subscription fee, even if it's sort of piecemeal. And, Sony's supposedly going to have, 9 or 10 games as a service coming out by 2026.
Supposedly.
Which remains to be seen. We haven't really seen any of them. I know that I think PlayStation Plus subscribers get the new Destiny expansion for no additional charge. I hesitate to say free, but that's a little bit of a deal. But again, it's not really necessarily appealing to unless people are already playing Destiny. But the second that it becomes it's like, oh, this is Call of Duty, it's a really huge game that Xbox has has by the reins. That's if there's a battle pass for Warzone or whatever, and it gets rolled into Game Pass, that's gonna probably get a few people to shell out a few bucks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
verifying what a lot of us probably knew. Game Pass, not great for game sales, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's just not great value in general for both us and for developers that are participating in it. Moving on this week, by the time this episode is up, our review of the PlayStation VR2 will be live, and our reviewer gave it a 9 out of 10. Reading from the review, the PlayStation VR2 may seem pricey, given that it costs $150 more than the base PS5 digital edition that you'll need to use it. Even so, it's such a quantum leap over the original PSVR in terms of ease of use, visual quality, and immersion that any PlayStation owner who loves VR should upgrade as soon as possible. The downside is that, like any new platform, its thin launch lineup makes its lack of backward compatibility with original PSVR games a significant problem, but one that will only improve as Sony and other developers roll out new games that take advantage of the PSVR 2's unique features. So Max, it seems like they really nailed it on the hardware upgrade.
That's really, really good to hear. I really love that. I'm not being sarcastic. Like, honestly, like reading that, that review kind of had me like raising my eyebrows and, looking at my checking account balance or whatever. But yeah, it's the issue is games. There's this little chunk of games. It's a pretty substantial launch lineup. It's like 30-ish games. Some of them are brand new, like Horizon Call of the Mountain. Some of them are sort of new, like new additions of existing games or games that have previously been on other platforms. And some of them are like sort of maybe free upgrades to existing PSVR games if you already own them. But it's sort of it's kind of fudging the numbers in terms of which of these are actually new. What I think needs to happen, and I've said this before, Sony needs to announce some stuff that's down the road. Like maybe not a full-on roadmap, but just dangle the carrot a little bit to get people excited about this and know that it has a future. And looking back on the PlayStation VR 1, something that it had that I don't really see the PSVR 2 having is a lot of recognizable IP. And Horizon was a lot of that. Like it's one of Sony's best-selling first-party properties. Resident Evil Village, again, another huge one. But Capcom announcing Resident Evil 7 being in PSVR 1 was one of many different studios popping up and being like, oh yeah, we're back in this cool hat. We got the amazing like free Star Wars Battlefront thing where you could hop in an X-Wing and fly around. Star Wars Squadrons got eventual support for that. There was also the Final Fantasy 15 fishing game, which was completely wacky, and again, it's a crazy concept. But the key thing that all of these do is that VR itself, what makes a good VR game is kind of has to be experienced. Like it's really hard to convey through just a trailer. However, if you take something that people are already familiar with and already like and say, yeah, but it's in VR, I think that's going to get people's attention a little bit better than just sort of being like, here's a bunch of stuff that like Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners, that's a recognizable IP, but it's an entirely new game franchise that exists in VR only. Like, it's not like taking, I don't know, Doom and being like, hey, we've made the VFR edition, which is Doom, but in VR, tailor-made for VR. People are like, oh, I like Doom. VR could be cool. Combine that. Sounds great. Or just the opposite of that, which is dumping the entirety of Skyrim in VR with not a whole lot of adjustment. But
my favorite PSVR 1 launch thing was it was a 90-minute experience. It was hardly a big, proper, full game, but it was Batman Arkham VR.
Yes, exactly.
Because that was ultimate fantasy fulfillment of like putting you in the cape and cowl and into this Arkham universe that you already knew and loved so much. And I agree with you, Max. And again, I have a PSVR 2 pre-order. I'm looking forward to getting it next week, but I have questioned it a couple times. I'm like, should I cancel this? And I'm currently sitting on no. I'm going to keep it because I see this as a generation-long investment for me, and I don't think the price will go down anytime soon on PSVR 2. So I feel like I might as well just buy it now since I was lucky enough to get a pre-order. But yeah, it's Horizon Call of the Mountain. It's go drive around in the free update for Gran Turismo 7, which, again, as I talked about, I think on this show last time, is awesome. It's super cool. But yeah, there's no like Batman Arkham VR. We need a heck of a lot more of that. Like I would go so far as to say, you were talking about kind of the PSVR 2 launch lineup in buckets of sort of the A-list new stuff, the ports, and then everything. It's mostly pretty terrible. Again, in name, at least, there's not a lot there that's sexy. It's really, it's Horizon. It's then the the VRification of 2-year-old games in GT7 and, as you mentioned, Resident Evil Village, and then it drops off. It's not to say there won't be good games in there, but it's a tough list, and you're right. We don't know anything for like the rest of the year on PSVR2. Sony's done a pretty terrible job of making you know, we know their games will be there, but when?
Yeah, and I mean, I get the sense that for PSVR 1, Sony threw a little bit of money to developers, being like, please back this pony, but maybe they need to do that again. Again, like, you know, Batman Arkham VR is a perfect example. You took something incredibly familiar, and it's something, who hasn't wanted to be Batman? Like, that's a cool thing. You get to do the Batman thing and dance around in the cape, and it looks cool. And, you know, that wasn't a full-fledged game. That was a short experience. And there were a bunch of those, and that's fine. Like, that got people in the door. That got people into, you know, checking it out. And I think, you know, in the case of VR, like, maybe some of those games are, I think terrible's a little bit callous, but you know, they're not big, huge AAA titles. They're not big, huge things. But if you get a bunch of them together, you've got that kind of, you know, like the mini cereal box sampler effect, where it's kind of fun because you've got such a great, you know, range of variety. It's not like, oh, I've got one massive AAA game and that's all I play. You get to try a bunch of different stuff in VR. And part of the fun of VR is also having people over and try it out.
That's true.
And watch them go, whoa! And so having, you know, kind of a sampler for that is cool. But yeah, like we did a thing on Beyond where I think I was just reading through the launch lineup, and like I was kind of scoffing at a few of the games because again, they don't ring any bells. Like, they're not familiar IP. They don't immediately sell what they are. I mean, some of them do, but like, you know, What the Bat, with all due respect, I think that game actually looks awesome. But it's like, it sounds like a joke game on The Simpsons, which again, it's a joke game. It looks really funny. I want to play it. But like, you know, if you're trying to get somebody to throw down $550 for a new headset, you know, when the game lineup sounds like one of those like 99-in-1 handheld things, and you're like, what is that? What's that game about? I don't know what that is. Yeah, I mean, Sony has been good about keeping things buttoned up and not really announcing stuff until it's kind of in the immediate future, which is cool. But I think we need a little bit more of that, like, you know, 2017, 2018 sizzle and getting people excited about it.
They also haven't been shy, to your exact point, about throwing some money at developers with on PS4 and right here into PS5. I mean, they're partnering up with Square on Forspoken. There's partnering up with Square again on Final Fantasy 16. We need that on PSVR 2, and hopefully that is lurking out there in the near future, but it sure would be nice to hear about it.
You know what's weird? I feel like Ubisoft is just like it's the champion of launch titles. Like, if something is launching, you know, if you're launching a Nokia N-Gage, a PlayStation Vita, Ubisoft is there.
They will
day
throw
one.
some spaghetti at the wall. I mean,
absolutely.
The original Kinect, they had like 2 or 3 games in the Kinect launch lineup.
Yeah, like that is a honestly like a pretty fun strategy, I guess. Like, we get a lot of crap that way, but also, you know, occasionally something works. And at the end of the day, they probably
Zombie U. Anybody?
Yeah. No, there were a lot of Ubisoft Wii U games early on, and I don't know. Maybe it feels weird that I don't think we have any for PSVR 2.
It's a good point.
I think we had Eagle Flight for the first one.
Yeah,
I want to say
they definitely had something.
Right.
Yeah, that came out eventually, but like Eagle Flight, it had some Assassin's Creed DNA, and that you were like, it was bird related in Paris, and there was sort of jumping off balconies, but at the end of the day, you were flying as an eagle, and it was kind of like, that's kind of self-explanatory, but you know,
Give me a little Far Cry thing.
Yeah, do something with that. I don't know. They have, I think they have a VR game where you help put out the fire at Notre Dame. I think that's them. I know they have like
kind of, that's a little, it's pretty real right there.
Yeah. There was also, I think there was, you know, like they have a bunch of VR stuff that they threw at, you know, MetaQuest, and I guess there's probably locked up in exclusivity deals. But like, again, yeah, it would be cool to see some big third-party support for this new headset.
Well, launch lineup aside, it seems like Sony really nailed it with the hardware, so it will be a great way for PlayStation owners to experience VR someday when the games eventually show up. Before we go, we have the results of last week's poll. We were talking about E3 and the fact that Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, apparently none of them will be at E3 this year. So we were asking, what do you most look forward to at E3, or what did you used to most look forward to? Winning result, game announcements, unsurprisingly, 64% of the vote. But at the bottom of the list was release dates, with only 10%. But I thought that was a little bit surprising, just because I think a popular complaint of gamers these days is just games being announced too far ahead of their release dates. The games are announced, and then you wait Literally, the sun will rise and set thousands of times before we even get an update on that game. Ryan, does that surprise you? Would you expect just actual like hard release dates would have been a little bit more popular?
Maybe not, because you do get just that fun community moment of a big announcement, even if it's a CG trailer and not a shred of actual gameplay, and the game is 3 years away. It's still just it's fun to. Whether you're watching it with your friends or you're talking about it with your friends later, and so yeah, it's game announcements all the way for sure.
How many of the really big E3 release date announcements get pushed? Like I feel like it's very frequent for like whenever somebody comes out on the stage and they're like, "We're coming out this day and date." I mean, that was a Starfield thing, wasn't it?
Well, yeah,
11/11.
Fallout 4 was announced at E3. Well,
then it came out.
Yeah, announced just before E3 2015, and then came out that fall as anticipated. And Skyrim was announced at the Game Awards in December of 2010, and then did make it out 11/11/11.
That's again, those are also
Todd likes to try and call his shot, and
which is cool. They're great release dates. It's also those games don't have the best reputation for being super stable at launch.
That's true.
Maybe Starfield will benefit from getting kicked down the road a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think release dates aren't particularly sexy. They're practical. They're great. You need one eventually. But like, when you're got that E3 buzz going of just like, whoa, the thing. It's like if Keanu Reeves stepped off stage and they were like, here's the release date. Actually, did they do that? Did they announce a release date with the Keanu Reeves stuff at Cyberpunk?
Can't remember. Don't think so.
Jury's out on that one. But the point is, they didn't meet that release date. Like, that got delayed once or twice after that, I think. So,
Well, I think you're sort of proving the respondents' point is that even if we get release dates, nobody believes them anymore anyway, because games are really tough and those dates often don't end up happening. So just give us the announcements.
Yeah.
We'll worry about the dates later.
All right, a poll for you to vote on for next week. Now that the PlayStation VR2 is out there, which VR headset are you most interested in? PSVR 2, Quest 2, HTC Vive, or are you still not interested in VR at all? That's still a valid response. Make sure to vote at IGN.com. We'll share the results with you next week. And that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Ryan and Max. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our LA and San Francisco studios to make all this possible. My name is Damon. We'll be back next week with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.